In this video, I'm going to continue the Gundam build diorama, and I'm going to start with a bunch of little bitty parts and one great big honking carrier deck. Now in the last video, I kind of showed my plan for getting this Grimoire Red Beret HG kit from Bandai onto a carrier deck and with some various figures around it, with the idea of reimagining it in 1/72 scale, and that it's in a near future environment, and it's some kind of carrier-based attack vehicle. So I thought that would be a pretty cool way to display it. Now the focus of this video will primarily be getting the deck figures, the little vehicle and the figures painted up, of course getting the carrier deck painted up, and getting all of that ready for the Grimoire Red Beret, which will be covered in later videos. Now, I've done some research on carrier deck crews, and I think everybody's, if you've ever watched carrier deck crews, especially American carrier deck crews, they tend to, you see they wear very colorful vests or shirts or jackets and helmets, depending on what job they do. There's some that designate, people who handle ammunition, or that do fuel, or that handle the aircraft, or that are fire teams, or to put out fires or whatever. So I'm going to be just putting some of those colors on there. I'm not going to be going for being purely accurate in all of my colors. I just want it to have that flavor to it. I'm not going to worry about if this guy right here, if his color is exactly right. Just we know he's a guy who's going to be driving the vehicle around. But I do need to get all of these little figures painted, and I did some research on what the other colors that they would have, because most of them are going to have a colored helmet and a colored jacket, but the pants will be just their standard uniform pants. And I've seen some that were camouflaged. I've seen some that were a lighter color, some that were a dark blue. I think what I'm going to do for simplicity's sake is just go for the dark blue. I don't know if that's what's currently being used, but I saw it in enough pictures to know it has been used. And my main reason there is it's going to be simple and it's going to show up well against the carrier deck. So doing it more for practical reasons than any kind of accuracy reasons. So let me get my paints together and I'm going to get started on these figures. I'm going to start off painting flesh tones, and I'm not going to try and be neat at all. I'm just going to try and get it everywhere there needs to be flesh so that it just covers it fully. I can go back later and neaten it up. For some of them, I'm going to use Citadel's Cadian Flesh Tone, and for some, I'll use Vallejo's Mahogany Brown. For the crewmen wearing the blue uniforms, I'm going to use Citadel's Cantor Blue. It's probably a little lighter than the actual color, but I think in scale it's going to work, because I generally try to have my colors a little lighter when looking at them in scale. I will put this on in 2 thin coats. For the pilot uniforms, I'm going to use Vallejo's Camouflage Olive Green. Looking at reference photos, it appears that there were tan uniforms used, but it looks like the more modern ones are this green. This isn't the exact color, but it's going to have shading and highlighting, so it's close enough for government work. All right, the flesh tones are painted and the pants are painted. So now it's time to paint the different colored jackets. I'm not going to bore you with that. You see how I painted the blue? That's how I'm going to paint the jackets. I'm just going to go online and look for some different colors and try to assign colors to what I think each of the dudes is doing. So that I'm probably going to use a whole bunch of different colors, not just use 1 or 2, just to make it look interesting. But I'm going to get those painted in, and also I'm just going to do the little details. I'll need to paint in their boots, their goggles, gloves that they're wearing. Of course, I'll need to finish up the pilots, their helmets and their straps and things like that. What's interesting is this one even has a wristwatch, so I'm going to have to try and be real precise and paint that on. But I'm just going to be doing detail painting on all the figures to move things along. To get started on the carrier deck, I gave the lines that separate the various deck panels a coat of Tamiya neutral gray. I'd seen in reference photos that these showed up a little bit of a different color on the edge of each plate. And then I used some Tamiya curve tape. It's a very flexible vinyl kind of tape. And I just masked off just the panel lines. It was a little difficult to get it aligned right on the panel line, but I got it lined up and cut the excess parts of the tape off, just cutting along the panel line. You have to hold this stuff down because it will hold in place, but it can slide around when you're trying to cut it. But pretty quickly I had all the lines masked off. Then I went and painted the deck with XF24 dark gray. And then I just began adding white into the mix and begin modeling it and streaking it and just really trying to give some tonal variation, so that once I got finished with that and pulled off all of that masking, it left me with those separations on the deck that I wanted. And I thought it ended up looking pretty good. I liked the direction that this was headed. The next thing I needed to do is to mask off the, I'm not sure what it's called, but I'll just call it a launch plate. Because again, in reference photos, I had noticed that this looked kind of metallic. So I wanted to mask it off and get that painted a metallic color. The shape up at the very front of it, or the back of it, I guess you would say, was a little complicated. So I masked over it completely and then used a toothpick to just kind of bring out the detail, and then used my hobby knife to cut it, just very gentle slices, letting the weight of the knife do most of the work. Really didn't bear down on it too much. And that way, once I pulled the mask off, I'd have a good separation of the two areas there. Had one little piece that I had to pull up where I'd missed right there on that corner. And then I could just use Tamiya tape to mask off the rest of it, getting along the edges there. And then once I had that done, I went ahead and put down some newspaper to just cover up the rest of the deck, because even though I was going to be spraying fairly in a fairly precise fashion, I didn't want any of that metallic color to get on the rest of the gray. So I covered everything in some newspaper just to make sure that there was no overspray that created any problems. I sprayed it with Tamiya gunmetal mixed with just a little bit of the neutral gray, just to make it look not quite so metallic. And once I was unmasking it, there were a few places that I got some overspray, but those will be easily correctable just with brush. But I liked how that ended up looking. It looks starting to look like a carrier deck. Now all I have to do is go into all of these tie-down points and paint them lead belcher, so they'll have the metallic look like I saw in reference photos. And I only have to do this a grand total of 109 times. I painted the little vehicle in an off-white color. It's not pure white, so it'll give me some room for some highlights. And then I just went in and began doing various base painting details. I painted the seat and the steering wheel in that area using German gray. It looks almost black against that white background. And then this tank thing on the back, I'm not sure what it is. I don't even know if this is the right color. I just thought a splash of some yellow would look pretty cool. Of course, I painted the fire extinguishers red, and then I went back later and painted in the details around them in black, just to help set them off a little bit. And then I painted the hose that's on there in RLMO2. I just thought that a less bright color might look good up there, and just painted that in. And then on the tires, I had airbrushed the rims with the off-white color, and then I went in with a dark blue-gray mixture and began painting around the rims to keep that edge looking fairly clean. And then once I had that edge painted, I could just go in and paint the rest in a little less precise fashion. All right, getting back to the figures, this has actually been the hardest part of the project so far, because they are really small, and my eyesight and the shakiness of my hands just does not work out to a good combination. So while I had some plans to really paint a whole lot of detail on these guys, I think I'm gonna back down from that a little bit and just go for base colors, some shade, and then a few highlights just to make my life a little easier. Now, after I got the base colors laid in, I gave each of the figures a coat of acrylic gloss. I used Pledge, but any acrylic gloss will do. For that matter, any gloss will do. I wanted to have a glossy surface so that for the next step, which is putting on some Citadel Agrax Earthshade, it would really pull down in those recesses. Now, I'm going to go in quite heavy with it because I want there to be a lot of contrast in here. Now, the reason I'm using the Agrax Earthshade is I feel like it's going to work good over all of the colors on all of the figures. I could go in with, it would probably be better to go in with a black on the pants and maybe some other different colors on some of the say the yellow or the red or something like that. But I thought Agrax Earthshade was just a good middle of the road shade that I can hit each one of them with. But it's going to add a lot of contrast to the model, and you'll note that I'm not being neat about it. I'm just slapping it on there, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back later with the base colors and just bring out a few highlights and neaten up any areas where it got a little too heavy in there. But because these figures are so small and are going to be viewed from a distance, having the contrasts on each of them, the contrast on each of them being very extreme, I guess you would say, is really going to help define the shapes and let people, pick out the details at a distance on the figure. The other thing this Agrax Earthshade is going to do for me is, because I'm using the flat Agrax Earthshade, it's going to flatten down all that gloss that I put on there. So this is acting as my matte coat also. Once the Agrax Earthshade is dry, I'm going to go in with just a slightly lighter shade of the base color. And I'm just going to start painting in some of the highlights, tops of the wrinkles, any details on the uniform, like places there along the collar, that kind of thing. I am going to have to do this off camera because, quite honestly, I really can't see what I'm doing trying to do this around the camera. But it's just a process of painting in the highlights and the raised areas. Now, there's just a few decals to put on the carrier deck. One is this nice bright stripy area that goes around this opening here. And then there's this nice long stripy decal that kind of goes between those and parallel to both. I'm going to have to do this off camera because I'm going to have to get in close to see what's going on. But the basic process will be as with any other decal. You put it in the water, you slide it off on here, and then because it's a long, narrow decal like that, you spend about 10 minutes adjusting and shouting paratrooper words and trying not to throw it against the wall and cursing the day you ever actually decided to do this kit. And then eventually you get it in place and it looks good. At least that's my process. Well, that was actually a lot less trouble than I thought it would be. It's still kind of crooked. I've been adjusting it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and I finally said, enough. It is what it is. So it is in place now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some Solvaset over both of those, and that'll get it stuck in place very nicely. All right, with the decals done, I'm going to do an oil wash along the details and in all of these tie downs and just the various panel lines that are around the model or around the deck. And I'm going to use this Wilder black brown. I want to use an oil wash here because it'll give me the ability to clean up as I need to better than an acrylic wash will, so I can work a little faster. See, I can just start plopping that in there and not have to worry about being precise because I can go clean all of that up. But I also like the fact that these Wilder oils dry really fast. I'll be able to do this work, clean it up, and I'll let it sit overnight, and it'll be ready for other applications to go on top of it. So I've got to do this on this whole deck area. I've already done the little vehicle here with the same stuff, and I'll just get this done, and it should be getting close to wrapping up this video. Well, I have the figures all shaded now, and I've got the deck with all of its washes and all of that done and cleaned up. So there's still a few little details to do. I need to do some more highlighting on some of the figures, and maybe a few more scuffs and stuff on the deck. You know, maybe a little more on the vehicle, but I think I'm ready to call this video completed. Now, in the video or videos that follow, I still haven't decided how many there's going to be. I'll be, of course, painting the Grimoire in the colors inspired by the V-22 Osprey. So be sure and check that out, because I plan to demonstrate airbrushing on a 3-color camo scheme and cleaning up the edges. And hopefully that will be useful. And then, of course, there's the decals. I'll only do a little bit of weathering. While if you've ever noticed naval aircraft, while they do get beat up looking in terms of various colored patches and streaks and things like that, they don't get chipped up a lot. They don't let that happen, because out in the ocean, of course, the corrosive salt air would pretty much be the end of them fairly quick. So they're fairly well maintained in terms of chipping and stuff like that. So it's mostly going to be just some streaking and discoloration and things like that. But that'll be in a follow-on video. And then, of course, once everything is painted and built, I'll get it all together. I'll probably glue the figures in place and the vehicle in place, but just set the mobile suit in place, so that if I do end up selling this, it'll be a little easier to ship, I think. But thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope it's been at least a little bit useful to just to see the process of getting this prepared. And I thank you for watching, especially if you're still watching at this point. I'm always grateful for that. There are links down below to the various social media platforms that I'm on, if you want to check those out. And there is a subscribe link, of course, right over here. I would be most grateful if you would check that out and subscribe to this channel, and maybe give this video a like and drop a comment down below. That helps me out a lot, and I'm most very grateful for it. Also, if you are a Patreon supporter, thank you so much for your support in this work that I do. My family and I are truly grateful for it, and it is really a blessing for us. So thank you very much. And as always, I'll leave you with one final thought. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.